I read an article in the Huffington Post yesterday about this chap who lives in Portland in America, and it was basically his story about his current life. And he graduated from grad school, and he moved with himself and his wife moved down from Canada to Portland to take up these jobs, and within a couple of days it fell through, and his wife wasn't able to work then because she was Canadian. And he currently, his situation is he lives about 20 miles from the centre of town, in a kind of suburban wasteland is how he described it. And I think he said his commute was about 2 hours every day, and he works in an aged care home, and this is after months and months and months and months of trying to get work. This was all he was able to get. Not that there's anything wrong with working in an aged care home, but it's not what he wants to do. He wants to be a writer. And he's got a little 18-month-old baby now, and he's just really, they haven't got any money to do anything except for him to commute to his job and back. His wife still can't work. He said this thing about, like, they play this game where they see how much food they can buy with the least amount of money. And the kind of headline on the article was, "I'm mostly scared that my family are going to starve to death." And I kind of read that and I was like, oh, that's just shocking. And then I thought, well, that's kind of a strange thing to say in America, because I kind of have this idea that America wouldn't happen in America. But he's saying that every time they go to the grocery shop, they when they're doing their grocery shopping, they always buy, they spend $1 out of each grocery shop on what he calls his food safety bin, and that's non-perishable food, just in case. And I kind of when I read that, I thought, well, he's just been a bit dramatic, maybe a bit paranoid, a bit scarcity. But he was saying he had to live out of the box for 2 weeks in October, which is pretty shocking. Like, I didn't say why, but just the way things happened. They didn't have enough money to go to the grocery store or whatever, and they had to live out of the food safety box. He said that all their friends live in the city, and because of the long distance it takes to commute on the public transport, they don't really have a social life. And such a tale of, like, whoa, I thought. And it just made me, like, wonder about just the way everything seems to be going. I could be just me and my life, but it seems like, from what I've read, that things are changing generally in the world, and in some ways it's becoming extremely difficult, like for that man and his family. And then in other ways, there's a lot of very positive things coming through. People are saying things that I kind of thought when I was a teenager and I was leaving school. Well, number one, I hated being in school. I couldn't get it. I didn't get it. I was labelled as being slow, so I was in a kind of slow class. I can remember how bored I was in school. This incredible boredom of, like, the time just seemed to drag and drag and drag. And I'm glad I learned what I learned, but I think I could have learned it in a better way, and I think kids are learning it in a better way now. I think that's just the time I came through. But then when it was like, okay, now what are you going to do with your life? And, like, what was offered was, yeah, well, you basically, I didn't put it in these terms, but what was offered was, you trade your hours for money. So we want the hours of your life, and then we'll give you some money for them. And that's what we'll do. What I started off first, I kind of had summer jobs, and I remember working in a tomato picking for a summer, and I couldn't believe, I think I lasted a week. less, no, yeah, about a week, because it was so like awful and so boring and so like rough. Everybody was just rough and savage, and you had to just fill these crates with tomatoes, and you got paid based on the number of crates you filled. And you see like movies where like the harvest is being taken in Tuscany or somewhere, and the beautiful sunshine, and everyone's laughing, and it's there's this brilliant soundtrack and fantastic montage. Yeah, well, that wasn't my experience at all. It was just in this godforsaken greenhouse, endless greenhouse. It was huge out in Rush in North County Dublin, and everybody, the workforce was this like popular group of savage teenagers who just were living like crazy. Anyway, I had lots of not so great jobs like that. That one, and then I went into carpentry as an apprentice, and that was the carpentry, the making stuff and the drawing and designing and working with my hands. That was interesting, and that didn't feel like a chore at all, and didn't feel hard. But working out in the building site was just very rough again, and I was into music at the time, and I was in a band, and that's kind of what I wanted to do, and I wanted to change the world with music. And the idea of like, yeah, well, you can't do that. You've got to do this other thing to make money, I mean, I was like 18. I didn't care about money. I did care about money, but I didn't care about it I cared a lot more about doing what I wanted to do. And but I was very much up against everyone around me. Like I remember I got the company that I was in the apprenticeship thing for, the grant that they were getting for me stopped. So they had to actually pay me, and then they stopped paying me. So I was out of work for a while, and I can remember all my friends at the time, and they were kind of going, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Well, I'm doing the band. I'm gonna, like I suppose I'm the my story to do with just the band thing. On the one hand, you've got like U2, who were roughly around the same time. We were they're into like their music was very different to what we were doing. We were kind of synth pop kind of band, but like if you read about the beginnings of U2, the beginnings of our little band were very similar. We had a couple of gigs. We probably played gigs in the same place, but ours didn't happen. It didn't. It seems like in most success stories, there's this pivotal moment where they get over this thing and then they never look back. Well, we never got over that thing. We never made it to that bit, and that's fine. But I can remember my friends like at the time were like, "You're doing the band? Well, what? Like, what are you going to do about a job?" And everything was about getting a job, and it was like the recession in the 80s, which looks like a kind of I don't know, like a pretend recession compared to what we've got happen in the world now. Because there was a big focus on trying to get jobs, trying to get work, and maybe statistically it was a lot worse. But it seems like this one maybe it's because I'm older. This one seems to be harder, biting harder. I never read articles about people in Portland who hadn't got enough food that they had to live out of their food safety box, that they even had a food safety box. So this back then I couldn't get it. I couldn't get this thing of like just getting a job just for the sake of getting a job, and just having this what felt to me like a grey existence, a passionless existence, just so you could have a job. And I wasn't even smart enough to kind of go, well, what's the point of having a job? You get a job so that you can get a mortgage, so that you can live in a place that you think you own but you don't really own because the bank owns it, so that you can earn money to have this house that you can't really live in because you have to go out every day to work to earn the money to buy this thing that you can't really. And then all the things that you want, you sit down in front of the telly and you're bombarded with all this stuff that you should be having, you should be buying, you should be living. So you have to, that's what you go and make the money for. So your whole life is about making money to spend money on stuff to try and have a life. It seemed crazy to me, but the consensus at the time was, no, that's what you do. Well, what's wrong with you? Well, what do you mean you don't want to do that? Like, that's crazy. Now, some of those very intense structures are starting to fall apart. It looks like the whole mortgage thing. People are going, it's crazy. I don't want to, I'm giving all my money to the bank, and I thought I was owning the property, but now I don't. Or certainly in Ireland, and it's possibly the same in lots of places around the world. There's a lot of people stuck in properties that they paid a lot of money for, so they have a huge mortgage. The value of the property is about half the mortgage repayment that they're paying, and they're basically stuck with that for years. So then it goes up the chain. You go, well, maybe the government's going to help, and then you see the government is like, certainly in Ireland, and it's probably the same in most Western countries. It's a variation of it, unless like you're in Switzerland or somewhere, or Germany. The government have given all the tax money they collected from the people to the bank for a bailout, or to try and pay off. It's the same equivalent, but just on a country level. So everyone in the country is going, what? And then you see a country, and then on the flip side, you see a country like Iceland, who, when things started to go bad, basically imprisoned the bankers who had got the country into the trouble that the country was in, and changed the constitution. And they're doing lots of fantastic things in Iceland. I mean, it remains to be seen whether it's going to work out, but it sounds better. It sounds much more encouraging, and it sounds much more empowering, because instead of being at the mercy of a external organisation, they're taking charge of it. So there's that. Then there's a general feeling of like there's the minimalist movement, where people are kind of going, why do we need so much stuff? Why do we need 3 plasma TVs and 4 cars and what do we need all this stuff? Because the stuff that we thought was going to make us happy isn't making us happy. So let's get rid of our stuff. Let's reduce the things that we own. There's a movement as well for this thing called the 100 items. Basically, you reduce everything in your life down to 100 items. I'm holding up one finger here. That's for 100. 100 items. That basically having less stuff makes you happier, which is kind of counter to the culture, But then even people are starting to kind of go, well, everything that comes through the telly, maybe that's not right. Maybe that's all like it's been changed a little bit. It's subtly being influenced, and we're being told. I mean, we all kind of know. We all look at the ads and go, yeah, the ads. Pff, you can't trust anything on the telly and the ads, but like ads work. I mean, it's amazing the number of times I'll be in a supermarket and I'll kind of go, oh yeah, I think I'll get that thing, and I'll have to think back through my thoughts. Luckily, from years of meditation, I can kind of catch it. But you kind of go, why do I want that particular thing? And we go back to some ad. And we go to some ad that I saw on the telly, of like, oh yeah, I'll just have this feeling of like sexy time in the sun. Oh yeah, that's right. And there'll be like some ad of like some beautiful people frolicking in the sun, and they're all with this particular product, and there I am like a sucker in the supermarket going, oh yeah, which one will I get? I'll get that one. Why do I want to get that? I don't know, I just have a nice feeling when I think about it. I mean, it's funny, but it's terrible. Because that on a bigger scale is like, it makes you unhappy when you don't have the fun, sexy tomato paste or whatever it is that was being advertised. It adds to this general feeling of there's a big party going on somewhere, and you're not involved in it because you don't have enough money, you haven't bought enough stuff, and all that kind of thing. So there's a general that kind of thing. Then there's in building and building practices and to do with the environment, there's a general thing of like, well, you know, what are we going to do about water? What are we going to do about our waste? What are we going to do about our electricity? We can't just keep doing what we're doing. We need to change it a bit. And even the whole thing of a house, there's like, why do we need such a big house? You know, like there's a movement in it's around the world now of tiny houses, where people live in these to get around building regulation and to be mortgage free. People are building these houses on flatbed trailers. So I think it's like 20 feet long by about 8 foot wide. And then they have a little kind of loft on the inside. If you look on the internet, tiny houses, you'll see them. And it's remarkable, like how ingenious people can be. And it's like, it's the architectural equivalent of this minimalist movement. It's basically like you can live in a smaller space. You can be happier in a smaller space because it encourages you to get rid of stuff. So rather than having a big house with lots of stuff stuck in it, you have this little small house and everything in it is precious to you because, you know, you can't have too much stuff in there. So everything there means something to you and it's very functional. And then often the multi-purpose side of it, everything has maybe 2 or 3 functions and it's cheaper to heat. And it's just, you know, and the nice thing is that it's on a trailer, you can move it. So because it's considered a not permanent structure, you can get around a lot of the building regulations. So you know, all you basically need is a friendly person who's happy for you to park it on their property, and you have whatever arrangement you have with them. But it's not a permanent structure. So there's a lot of that going on in America, where people. I saw this guy with a family of, I think it was 3 boys, himself, his wife, and 3 boys. So 5 of them living in this tiny home, and you think that's like gypsies, isn't it? But it's not when you actually when you look at it and you look into it and you see what he did. And what is really nice is at the start, particularly that story with the guy with the 3 kids, 3 boys. At the start of it, he's basically I don't know whether he had a mortgage or he was living in rented accommodation or what the particular story was, but there was a huge feeling of disempowerment. And then when he's talking about building his house, and he built it all from, he worked out a deal with these local builders providers, but it was a big chain builders providers. I can't remember, Lowe's, I think he said the name of it was. Anyway, so the manager of Lowe's would like anything that got damaged, bits of wood, bits of timber that got damaged, that he knew were the dimensions that this guy was looking for. He'd put them to one side and he'd sell them to this guy cheap, because otherwise they'd just bin them, they just scrap them because it's a big chain. So he built his house like for very, very little money, and he was so happy with it and so proud of what he'd done, and rightly so. And that's when you watch a few videos on these people with the tiny houses, you'll see that they a lot of them talk about this thing of that we've lost the ability to shelter ourselves, that we've abdicated that, like we've abdicated most things. We basically, we let the professionals do that. So when they're building their little tiny homes, they have this really good feeling of like that they created their own shelter. So that's a positive thing that's coming, that's changing. And then Earthships is another thing I've kind of come across, which are these, this guy in New Mexico, I've forgotten his name, Mike something or other. I'll put a link in the show notes. There's a great documentary about him called Garbage Warrior, which is basically about, he's been doing this for 30 years. And he's an architect, and he was basically going, we've got to develop our idea of sheltered buildings in relation to the environment. And he's the guy who kind of come up with this thing of the tires, building the walls out of tires with rammed earth in them. Hugely labour intensive, because you have to put each tire there and you put them in. But he's basically used, the beautiful thing is that he's using tires which we can't get rid of. There's just so many old tires in the world that we just don't know what to do with. They're very hard, they're not biodegradable, it's very hard to do anything with them. So he's building with them. But as I say, it's very labour intensive. But then the other design is, because it was out in the desert where he was making it, where he started making them, the houses had to do everything. So they have to generate their own power, they have to process their own waste, and they have to collect their own water. So in that documentary, The Garbage Warrior, there's because there's quite a few of people have built these houses out there. They're called Earthships. Now, as I say, he's been doing it for 30 years, so it's a bit of a hippy-dippy kind of name, Earthships. But anyway, that's the name that stuck with them. And he one of the people who had built an Earthship, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, whatever, they were talking about their daughter who's 5, and he was saying that his daughter thinks that houses should provide you power, should provide you with water. They also, built into the Earthships is they have greenhouses built into them so that they produce all the food. So the house produces the food. And he was saying she basically thinks buildings just take care of you. You know, they give you everything you need. They provide the power because they've got solar panels. They provide water because they have rainwater collection systems in them. Then the water that they collect, they use, you know, that goes from rainwater to grey water. The grey water is used then for washing and that kind of thing. And then in the toilets, then that becomes black water, and then the black water is processed through a couple of tanks, and then that goes to feed the hydroponic bays and the greenhouses and whatnot. It's beautiful the way the whole thing works together. Ugly, they're ugly kind of buildings, I have to say. But that doesn't. I don't think that would bother me, just knowing that, you know, you've got that kind of thing going on. So that's a lovely movement as well. And if you like Earthships, have a look at the Grand Designs video. There's one a guy built in France. Beautiful. It's very nice looking, the end result, but very labour intensive as well. So, so on the one hand, you've got this terrible poverty of spirit going on. As I said, like the chap in Portland. And then on the other hand, you've got this great change in people's approach to things. But unfortunately, most people are stuck in the middle. They're stuck in, because there's the old system. I don't like to call it the old system because what has been in place is changing, and something hasn't completely replaced it yet. A better thing hasn't completely replaced it yet. But then you've got all this other very positive things that are happening, like Bitcoin. If you haven't come across Bitcoin, that's a digital currency, which is, I think there's a great future. I think the future is in digital currencies because this drive for profit, particularly in financial institutions, has forced us all in line. It's like it's cheap because in the current capitalist model of, you know, growth, you have to keep getting rid of people because they're very expensive. So you automate. So our financial lives have become very automated. You could get through the day without ever having to spend any cash, and then so we've all got used to that now. And then something like Bitcoin comes along. And even whether Bitcoin is the one that kind of completely takes off or not, the idea of digital currency, decentralized digital currency that's not regulated by anyone, that I think is gonna happen, so that you can basically, all the things that you buy online now, the things that you do online now, you can do with a currency that doesn't go through a bank that you're not getting charged on. Because you know yourself, you have to look at your bank statement to see how often you're getting charged for everything. And of course, the little money, it's not the big money that you see in your statement, it's all the little bits of money that who has the time to follow up on, right? That's where you're really getting screwed by the banks everywhere. So Bitcoin is a digital currency that operates exactly like PayPal, but there's no fees, or the fees are teeny tiny, but there's no bank. It's not a bank. It's basically taking the idea of a fiat currency that basically has nothing to back it up. It's just, we agree this is going to call this thing money, and use it as a medium of exchange. It's taking that and saying, okay, well, instead of saying that's the medium of exchange, let's say it's this thing, Bitcoin. So if that sounds interesting to you, have a look at that. Have a look at Bitcoin. And the whole thing of direct governance is slowly moving forward as well. So there's many positive things, but then there's many very difficult, harrowing things as well. Like the chap in Portland. So I know for me, it's difficult. I find it very difficult to kind of stay on the cusp because, you want to balance everything between you want to be ready and flexible for changes that are coming, and they're coming pretty fast now. But on the other hand, it's a bit scary. It's a bit scary as things start to fall apart, and a lot of that scariness is comes through socially and media and through the news and through ways that kind of if you're afraid, then it's easy to feel disempowered. So it's better to feel afraid. It's better for the people who want you to feel afraid. So because then it's easier to control, to be controlled. So all I can do on a personal level is be alert for fear, anxiety, and deal with it head on as much as I can. Manage it as much as I can. Meditate. Look into the roots of my fear. What's real? What's not real? And then what's really real for me, which is love and compassion and growth and sweetness. Those kind of things, and focus on that, consciously focus on that. Whether I'm in a traffic jam somewhere and I see something beautiful, to not just kind of go, to actually kind of go, wow, look at that, isn't that lovely? Isn't that really nice? Even if everyone else in the car is going, can we go? Or everyone, no one else gets it. Doesn't matter whether anyone else gets it, because I'm the only one who's in charge. I'm the only one who lives in my body, so I'm the only one who's going to be happy or sad or afraid, or I'm the only one who gets to live with that. So being the sovereign of inside myself and being in charge of how I feel is it sounds like a small thing, but it's a huge thing. Because if I don't know, you can think of yourself as I can think of myself as one cell in the great body of humanity. I don't know whether that's true or not, but it's not a bad way to think about it in terms of if I take care of me, in terms of if I take care of not being afraid, if I take care of not being anxious, then that's my contribution to the whole of the body. And if all the other cells did that as well, then the body would do very well. Without the fear and the anxiety. So I kind of think of it like that. I don't know whether that's actually the way it is. I've talked about that in other podcasts about reality and what it's all like outside. But just it's a nice way of thinking about it. But even whether it's true or not, I still end up happier on the inside, and that's a good thing. Okay, enough for now. So if you like the podcast, do leave a review. Do the 3 stars review on iTunes. It's the podcast is doing very well on podcasts in the charts on iTunes. It's up on the top of philosophy. So the way the categories work in iTunes is I think it's under people and culture or something like that, and then within that the subcategory of philosophy. So it's up there in philosophy, which is nice because more people get to hear it, and I think that's good. So if you leave a review, that helps to bring it up on the ratings. Okay, till the next time.